All right, well, we might get started. Are you right to get started, Kristin? All's good with your computer?
Yep, I just plugged it in, so we're good to
Perfect.
go.
All right, so thank you everyone for joining today. Really appreciate your time and looking forward to hearing from Kristin. And so we're going to be talking about Kristin's farm, Minglewood in America, which is an indoor housed AMS in combination with a parlour. And just before we get started, which you probably all would have heard when you logged in, we'll record this session. If you've got any questions, feel free to either raise your hand. There's a function to raise your hand. Put into the chat function some questions, or you can just jump in if you've got something you want to add or question. And yeah, we'll hand it over to you, Kristin. Thank you also for being a part of this for us today.
All right, well, thanks for having me. When Jason called me in Canada, my phone wouldn't let me answer his phone call, so I'm glad he got me connected with all of you and everything. So I'll just kind of dive right in. This is a PowerPoint that I have used for numerous other presentations we've done for DeLaval over the course of the last few months. So there's a lot of DeLaval facts in here just because we've done a lot of presentations with them as of recently. So I will go ahead and get started here. So as Tori said, my name is Kristin Quist. I'm from Minglewood Inc. We're located in Wisconsin in America. So going right into it, a little bit about our operation. My parents, Kevin and Roxanne, are the owners of the operation today, along my brother is involved as Ryan, and my husband and I are the fifth generation to be involved in the dairy. We started in 1894 with more draft horses than cows. Now today we're milking about 1,230 cows. We raise our young stock up until about 6 months of age. At 6 months of age, they go to a custom grower who grows them for us, and they come home about 2 months before freshening. We also crop 3,200 acres of mainly about half of that goes for feed for the dairy, being alfalfa and corn silage. The other half we plant in grain corn, some of that going to the dairy, a lot of that being sold for grain, and then we raise soybeans as well. And we also, within the last year and a half, thanks to COVID, we opened a retail store on our farm called Minglewood Eats and Treats. Very, very small scale. I'm getting feedback from someone, but very small scale. We started it when we had nowhere to go with our cull cows that needed to go to a processing plant. And we are now butchering about 32 head a year that we are selling all locally. And we've also added cheese from our creamery where our milk goes into that as well. So a little bit about the farm. So we have 8 classic VMS robots today. We don't have the new V300. We have the old classics. We are a guided flow barn. Our barn is the ventilation is positive pressure. So we have an inlet end and an outlet end. We have about 85 fans in all in our barn. It stays very cool in there. So 3 years ago, shortly after we had moved into the facility, we had a day where we hit 32 below 0 Fahrenheit. And the barn stayed 60 degrees warmer inside than it was outside. So definitely stays warmer in the winter, cooler in the summer. Roughly today we're milking about 500 cows on our VMSs, and we're still milking about 700 cows in a 9 parallel parlor that is about 29 years old. So it has definitely seen its better days. And then we built the robot barn in 2018. So we expanded the herd with robotics in 2018. We added one full-time herdsman to run the robot barn while adding approximately 500 cows to the herd. So some of this production data is back from August, but on August 16th, we were averaging 106 pounds per cow in our robot barn. They were averaging at that time 8.7 pounds of pellet. Today we are down to 5.7. So we've been working, that was our goal here starting in September. We wanted to start decreasing the amount of pellet. We are feeding the cows in the robot and put more of that back in the bunk to hopefully drive butter fat. Our butter fat is a little bit lower in this facility versus the parlor. And we attribute that to just having to feed them a little bit differently because we have to feed them part of their protein in the robot versus having a full TMR. We're averaging about 2.8 milkings per day, which is right where we want to see it. Combined fat and protein, we're sitting at 7.2 pounds, which our goal is 7. So we are very happy to be there. Energy corrected milk, about 115 pounds. Our preg rate is sitting at a 32%. We do double off sync. We calve year round. So milk production per box. So our second and greater lactation average per box is about 6,300 pounds of milk. Our first lactation average per box is about 5,300, so about 1,000 less. And that's pretty typical of what we see. We do have one pen that is solely just first lactation heifers. The other 3 pens are all second and greater lactation. So a lot of people ask us, how did you get to robots? We initially had plans about 10 years ago to put a 60 stall rotary in. Then we had some staffing issues in our upper management that we lost some very talented people. So kind of plans got derailed. Then we were coming back around and we were still looking at putting a rotary in, but our financial consultant really encouraged us to look at robots. And so that's what we did. He really liked the numbers that he was seeing. So we went ahead and started looking at robots. We spent 2 years on the road, traveling from North Dakota to Ohio, looking at systems. We looked at Lely, we looked at DeLaval, free flow, guided flow systems. We looked at all the system. And our dealership knew we had plans to do something from day one, that we started looking at robots. So they were very involved with the decision-making process. So when we started up, let me just make sure I didn't miss a slide. Yep. So it'll be 3 years here now, coming up on November 28th. We started with 320 cows total, 40 cows per robot. We started all 8 robots at once. We only had to live through the hell once. That way, we had talked about starting 4 and 4 up. And we said, if we're going to have to get the manpower here, let's get them here once, get it done and over with, and then we can all move on. We started up the Tuesday after Thanksgiving here in the States. We wanted to be going a little bit so we could enjoy Christmas and not be starting up a week or 2 before Christmas. We were to full capacity by March of 2019, and we did no pre-training on our cows. We did not have a good spot to put a training stall in or any of that stuff. So it was just, everything was brand new to everyone all at once, including the cows. So we get asked a lot of times, why did you decide to go with DeLaval over Lely? Don't get me wrong, there is great things about both systems. It just really comes down to farmer preference and what your goals and objectives are. Our biggest thing was our dealership. We picked our dealership before we picked the kind of robot we were going to install, because we knew we were going to have to rely on them heavily, because Now we're working with robotic milking. Things are bound to go down. Who's going to be able to come and service us? And our DeLaval dealer was already servicing us. We've had DeLaval milking equipment forever. We have DeLaval calf feeders. So it was just kind of the natural selection for us. Guided flow. We felt we saw too many barns that were free flow that had inefficient use of the robot, and their pellet consumption was much higher. It was just really hard for us to see cows coming into the robot, and you could tell all they wanted was a little bit of that pellet. And I want efficient use of my robot. If they're just going to be going in there to get kicked right back out again, that's not efficient use for me with how we operate. Our dealership was able to show us some numbers, free flow versus guided flow, and we just felt guided flow was overall a better fit for us. So that's where we went. Our dealership also happens to be a dealership that DeLaval has taken a lot of ideas from and implemented. So knowing that made it an easy decision for us. The gripper sensors on the robots, our dealership has made their own sand kits for it to hold up better in sand than what the original kit that DeLaval had and whatnot. So it was just kind of the natural path for us to take, knowing that they were going to stand behind us and, you know, be innovative. And if something's not working right, some parts aren't holding up, they're probably going to take the bull by the horns and figure something out themselves. So we do still milk in our parlor. So we have one fresh pen. So when everyone freshens, they go to the same fresh pen, and that fresh pen is in the parlor. Everyone is milked in the parlor for at least 7 days after freshening, depending on the day of the week, because we move cows out, on Wednesdays. So how do we decide which cows go where? So every Thursday afternoon, our herdsman goes through the fresh pen when they come in to be milked, when their udders are full of milk, and he scores the cows based on udder conformation and attitude to decide if they're going to go to the VMS or not. We've had some cows that have been great candidates, but their attitude just has not been there, and you can just tell they're not going to work in the robot. Where the next cow, we have the classics, we don't have the new V300, so we have to pay very close attention to crossing rear teats, because they're just not going to work with our robot, being we have the laser versus the camera that's on the new robot. Cows can come into the robot as early as 7 days of milk. Heifers, we used to bring them in earlier, but what we found is that we ended up fetching them a lot more often, and we have the ability to be a selected herd, so why not hold them in the parlor a little bit longer, let them get used to being milked, what's going on and whatnot. So now they do not come up to the robots until between 30 and 40 days in milk, and they don't become chronic fetch cows. They know what it means to get milked by now. They know what's going on. It's not a bunch of new changes to them all at once, is what we have found works best for us.
Kristin, do you, once you have decided that a cow is suitable to go to the AMS, do they then stay milking with the robots for their, like is the intention that they'll stay an AMS cow for their whole life, or
so the intention is that if they're going to go to the robot, they're typically going to be a robot cow for the rest of their life, we hope. However, all of our milk is saleable milk in our robotic facility. So if she gets mastitis, she gets pneumonia, has to be treated with any antibiotics for whatever reason, she will go back to the parlor, because the intention was, when we originally did that, we were collecting milk to pasteurize and feed our calves, and wanted one central location to do that. Was the big driving force to that. We've since switched to feeding our cows milk replacer because we didn't have enough waste milk anymore. But anything treated with antibiotics goes back to the parlor facility. If she doesn't get sick, whatever, she stays up in the robot barn. But if that cow has to go back to the parlor because she's being treated, It's not to say that she won't come back to the robots after she's been cleared. It's just we've chose to have all of our treated milk in one spot versus in multiple spots. And we just felt that the waste milk collection systems for the robots just wasn't really what we wanted to see. And also, every time a treated cow goes through a robot, you have to do a 10-minute local rinse after she comes through. And to us, that was losing a lot of efficiency, and we could milk another cow and a half in that time it's washing. Instead, we could milk that another cow and a half while it's washing from a treated cow. So we just decided no treated cows in the facility is what has worked best for us. So we're getting to the end of my slides here, but just so you all can get a visual of what our barn looks like. So all the air and the manure flow to the same direction. They both flow to the north. So on the south end of our barn, on the outside of the barn wall is a driveway, and right across that driveway is our calving facility. So we really didn't, ideally, in a perfect world, we would have blown the air to the south, but that wasn't going to work with how everything is laid out here. So this is how it's laid out. You'll also notice our robots are in here at an angle. So this is something that our dealership started playing with. They really started looking at Temple Grandin's work that she has done with cattle tubs and cattle handling and welfare and whatnot. And they had a barn that went in a year before ours was built, so the winter of 2017. And they laid the robots in like this at the angle, and they just found the cow flow into the robots was just so much better versus them having to come in at straight and kind of go at an angle to come in. They're able to walk right into the robot without really having to maneuver themselves to get over into the milking stall. It's just a natural way for the cow to move. And we'll go to facilities now, robot facilities, where the cows have to enter more straight on than the eagle like ours. And I just always come home and I can't believe how much our cows are just waiting to go into the robot. We don't have issues with the cows just hanging, not wanting to go into the robot. I think the flow is just more natural for them. So we were happy we went with the angled robots. So I don't know. I think they have another barn they're installing right now that's going to lay their robots in like this, but I don't know if it's happened with any other facilities at this time. So other things we have in the barn, we have 2 robotic feed pushers. Each one does 2 pens. We have 4 pens. It takes about 30 to 35 minutes for each one to do its round. We push feed up every 2 hours. And then we also have alley scrapers in here that run every 2 hours. But that's all. I think that's all of my slides. No, I do have another one here. So this is just a closer up of what the robot, an actual picture of what the robots look like in person. So that, of course, was before cows had went through our facility. And now we've installed some other gating. The gate that DeLaval provided to use as the gate to hold your next cow when you're fetching cows to go into the robot. It just wasn't going to work for us. It was too small. We have really large cows. We don't have an average sized Holstein by any means. So we, in between the robots here, there's actually 2 gates here now that we can swing. They're long enough. So when I'm fetching cows, where this gate is here, where the entrance gate would be, I have a gate that I can swing and hold the next cow here, so I can go to the next pen if there's another cow for me to fetch over there, so we can make more efficient use of our time and whatnot. And the cows, just the gate is big enough for our size cows that it just works much better for us. So it was a lot of learning along the way. We're 3 years into this, but we're still learning every day. And the biggest thing, we didn't want to play with our feed tables for the longest time because we just wanted to get comfortable and get the production metrics we wanted, and we're looking for and everything. And now there's a number of producers across the United States here that we're all starting to talk with one another and implementing different strategies and learning from each other about what we've done and what's worked, especially on the pellet consumption. We've been lucky to we got hooked in with a producer in Colorado that I think they're milking with 30 robots right now, if I'm not mistaken. And she has been a wealth of knowledge for us, just because she's really been playing with her pellet consumption. So that's all I have for slides, but I would love to answer any of your questions, any questions that you might have for me.
Thanks, Kristin. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to ask. I've got a question for you, Kristin. You currently have the 8 robots, but you have capacity to increase the number of robots. Is that right?
Yes. So the barn is laid out to expand with another 8 robots. The excavating is done, the water lines are dug already, but it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, I think, at this point, because with the labor pool, how it is here in the States right now, in the cost of labor getting extremely high, based on how we're getting paid still, our milk markets haven't changed enough to reflect that. It's only a matter of time before we implement more robots, because we can't pay someone $20 an hour to milk cows. It's just not feasible for us, because our cost of production is just going to be atrocious then. So we have plans to do that. They will be the new robot. So unfortunately, what happened, why we got the classic robots, the day after our loan was approved, that is the day our dealership found out about the V300s. Our classics were already had been shipped over here from Sweden. They were sitting in our pull shed, and if we were going to go ahead with the 300s, it was going to delay our project by about another 5 to 6 months. And at that point, the bank just said that wasn't going to be feasible. So we just went ahead with what we've got. But there's a question here. If you are using guided flow, are you bringing up groups in batches? So I think I know what you're meaning by this, but feel free to chime in if I'm not quite answering your question correctly. So we will, when we're fetching cows, we'll go out and find all of our fetch cows and bring them all up at once. So they'll get sorted into the pen. Otherwise the cows, just flow and go through the gates as they please. So we do have parameters set. So if a cow is more overdue, then she get permission over the cow that's just coming up on her permission to be milked, to be able to go in. So we typically cap our holding pens at 14 cows, but it can go up to 17 if there's overdue cows that come through. How long did it take to construct your current barn? We started around May 15th of 2018, and we started milking cows on November 28th. So it was about 6 months. We really had to push hard at the end on our contractors to get it done, but we got it done. Our somatic cell count is about 70,000. That is what it is ran for the whole last year. In our parlor, it runs between 100 and 110. I will say some of that is attributed, we bet our cows with sand. And we're lucky, we live in an area where frac sand was a big thing here the last 5 to 7 years. So there's a lot of what they called reject frac sand. laying around. So it's dried and everything time we get it. So there's no bacteria growing in it. So of course, mastitis issues have been pretty minimal in the robots as well. How many staff are required to run your operation, including family members and full-time employees? We have 21 non-family full-time employees, and then there are 5 family employees for a total of 26. So we have a whole cropping entity. So that's about 5 to 6 employees altogether on itself. The rest are mainly dairy employees. And then my mom and I do a lot of the books and everything as well. So it takes a lot of us, but we enjoy what we do. So it's worth it at the end of the day.
How, Kristin, with the employees, because you've got the parlour and the robots, how are they distributed between the two
Sure.
dairies, I
so
guess?
Noah, who is our robot herdsman, he started with us about a year and a half before we put the robots in, just as a herdsman for our dairy at the size it was at that time. But he has a pretty large herd of goats at home as well. So when he came to us, he said, I only want to work 40 hours a week. And we said, that's fine. He only wanted to work Monday through Friday. So the robot position was the perfect position for him. So he works 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Some days it's less than 8 hours. It really just depends on what's going on for the day. Thursdays and Fridays are our lighter days in the robot. But then when he is finished for the day, our other herdsman, our herd manager, Travis, and his crew, they're usually done with their heavy work in the freestyle barn for the morning, giving shots, treating cows, all that stuff. So then they are able to take care of any alarms that might come through in the robots from about 1 to 7 p.m. At 7 p.m. we have a nighttime herdsman, so to say, that comes in, and he does our third feeding on our bottle calves for us. He milks the treated pen, he does any calvings, does things like that. My husband does pretty much 90% of the maintenance. I would love to be able to find another person to learn the maintenance on the robots, but it's just been hard to find someone. And the thing with the robot alarms is you want them to be somewhat close to the dairy as well, because if they need to get up in the middle of the night and, go fix something, I don't want them to have to be driving a half hour to 45 minutes, to come fix something that's going to take 5 minutes to fix. So we look at it a lot in man hours a day of what it's taking. Our goal when we started this, excluding feeding and breeding, because we already had a feeder and we hire our breeding out, was to get to about 12 man hours a day. We're sitting at about 12 and a half today. Some days more, some days less, of course. So we've been very happy. So it takes, I would say, about 1.5 people. That half person is just spread over a lot of different people. Let's see, can you share a bit about the feeding of cows and how many times per day you deliver feed? So right now, we're going into our cooler time of the year. Here we are feeding once a day, but from about May 25th, usually through September 15th, we do feed twice a day. We are toying with going to twice a day feeding year round, but I need to do some convincing of my feeder of that to get him to come back a second time a day year round, especially because he's got a large herd of beef cows at home too. So our ration, our PMR that's fed in the bunk is about 60% homegrown feed, haylage and corn silage. We do feed palm fat, which we feel has really driven our components, but I don't know what you guys are seeing for feed prices right now, but palm fat has gone through the absolute roof here in the last 2 to 3 months. It's gone up almost $1,000 a ton here. So we're kind of toying with whether we need to continue feeding that or not. The protein that we feed our cows in the robot, we just feed them a corn gluten pellet. We did start off with feeding them the fancier robot pellets we got from our feed provider, but they were expensive. And we thought we'll try some corn gluten. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's ended up working very, very well for us. So that's kind of where we've stayed. Is the barn overstocked? We have, I believe it is 110 free stalls per pen, and we designed them to be 120 cow pens, because in a robot barn, they're not all getting up to come to the feed bunk at the same time. They're all kind of on their own schedule. So you could say there's 10 more cows than there is stalls. What kind of management system do you have in place for both the barn and the parlor? So we do use DeLaval's software. So we use DelPro in both systems because we use DeLaval's activity callers. So we need DelPro for that in our parlor facility. And then we need DelPro, of course, to run the robots. But our main herd management software that we use is Dairy Comp, which is pretty widely used here in our part of the states, is where we keep everything. So it's a mixture of DelPro and Dairy Comp. They do talk back and forth. So all of our milk weights do get loaded into Dairy Comp and all of that fun stuff, but it's only great when they talk to each other. So.
Sorry, Kristin, it's Karen Romano. Just to clarify on that question, I was really interested in the requirements for your effluent management system, both with the barn and the outside parlour. So just to understand what sort of regulations you need to work with and what systems you have in place.
So there's not a whole lot of regulations we need to really work with, other than the biggest regulation we had to work with as far as the robots was in the United States. They say there has to be airflow in the robot rooms. But what the test is, no one can tell us other than it's a sheet of paper moving in the wind. So it's what we've learned through all the robots, because we're close enough to Canada. I can drive to Canada from where I live in about half of a day. So what they can get away with in Canada compared to here is completely different. And it just blows my mind as far as, what our milking regulations are compared to yours are probably much different than mine and whatnot. It just kind of varies. We don't have a lot of, things that we have to, other than what the milk inspector says, has to be done. We load our milk right into tankers, so we don't have any of that stuff to worry about. When we built this barn, we said we weren't going to deal with bulk tanks anymore, and I'm currently ripping my bulk tanks out of my parlor right now just because I'm done, and I don't want it to be my responsibility, the washing and all of that fun stuff anymore. So
I think, Kristin, the question there also was about kind of manure. Kind of if there was any requirement to manage
okay. Yeah,
manure.
You guys just use some different words than I'm used to. So the manure all goes to the same place from both facilities. So from the barn, the robot barn, it all comes into a channel at the north end of the barn, and then it goes out to a reception pit. And then from there, it goes through a pipe that's buried to our manure pit that we constructed when we built the barn in 2018. Our other facility is all gravity flow, so we just push it to the center of the barn. It goes out through a tunnel into a pit. So at this point in time, I don't have any sand separation. We're hoping to add that here within the next year. It's just, I buy 15 loads of sand a week. It's just kind of crazy. The sand is free, but the trucking, of course, is not free. And they're trucking it about an hour and 10 minutes from the pit to our place. So it's not a short drive. So everything is pretty much gravity flow, or it goes through the pipe. We air blow that pipe twice a day just to make sure it's not plugged. It did get plugged the first week we were in the barn. Not gonna lie, it was no fun. But the company that installed it, they came up and unplugged the pipes. So worked through some bugs there and everything. But I just can't wait to get my sand separating system in and just have to quit buying 15 loads of sand a week. So I hope that answers your question. So Amber asked, how do we manage our calves? So our calves are automatic feeders in a barn. So they are housed in individual hutches for the first 4 days. And then I move them inside to the group pens when they're 4 days old. And then they are on the feeder for 56 days. So we wean them when they are 60 days old. And thanks to the feeders, we can do a slow ramp down. So we wean them over the course of 14 days. Our calves, we do feed them a very, very high nutrition. I do max them out at 12 liters of milk a day at their peak, which some people say is too much. For us, we grow big cows. We like big cows. We kind of like fancy cows. So we tend to push the milk to them. It's not uncommon for me to have a calf weigh 300 pounds when I wean her at 60 days of age. A lot more at 250, 240, but occasionally you'll get a few at 300 pounds, which they grow into nice big cows then.
Do you think, Kristin, there's a benefit of calves being in feeders, kind of in that voluntary cow traffic to the feeder back and forth, that can then benefit them when going to the robot?
Sure. So we've been feeding with the automatic feeders since 2012, so just about 10 years. And the first thing we noticed when those first animals started coming through the system late 2013 into 2014 was how much more friendly they were. They were calmer to work with, easier to work with, just because they were used to being handled in a group from, being 4 days old, when they really didn't know what was going on. So we do feel in our dealership, we've had talks about this too, because they have a number of herds that have automatic feeders and robots, and then they have a handful of herds that they are feeding their calves, conventional hutches, individual pens, and then they milk with the robots. And it just seems they understand the system a lot better. They take to it faster. I don't know if it's just because they've been grouped from day one, or that when they were little, they had to learn, how to come up on their own to eat. But we've just found it's been the best way for us to raise our calves. What works here isn't going to work on the next farm. We all know that. So we feel it's been a benefit, but I can really only speak for our herd. How important is milk per robot, and what do you think are the factors that explain the high milk per robot on your farm? So I'm going to be quite honest. Our goal for our mature cows on our robots is 7,000 pounds a robot. We've hit it a handful of times. There are some herds that now with the new robot are hitting it, but they also are allowed to have more cows per robot. So we max our robots. Typically our sweet spot is 62 cows a robot. The new robots, you can go 65 to 68 pretty comfortably from what we've heard. Milk per robot, it's kind of I really don't know how important it is. It's just more of a metric we look at. I guess I don't think we've been far enough into this yet to really say, is it super important to us, or is how we've always measured our milk production and, pounds of cow per day more important to us? I really can't say at this time, but we've always had high producing cows. Our whole farm with our parlour cows added in, we're averaging right around 96 pounds of milk a day right now. And we constantly want to be 100-pound herd or more. Our goal when we built our robot facility was to build it for 120 pounds. So energy corrected, we're almost there, but we are also a herd that once we hit the bars we've set for ourselves, we're going to raise it even higher. What about comforts? Foot bath scratchers? Yes. So we do have a foot bath. So all of our cows, they come down. I'll go back a slide here. So all of our cows have to come. Here's the robot. They come over here through a another sort gate, because we have a separation pen here that we use for vet check, hoof trimming, dry off sync breeding day. We'll sort all those cows into the separation pen. Our biggest thing is we don't want to have to go out into the general population more than we have to and disrupt their normal day. But then they'll go down here. This is the feed bunk. And down here, this is one-way traffic right here. So we only have one crossover. These up here are waterers. So we have our regular crossover here, and right here is our foot bath. So we run our foot bath 3 times a week. We just do copper sulfate. So when we run them, we just have a gate here that we swing over and we shut the other one. When we're not running them, we swing the gate and shut the foot bath. So our biggest fear was having a crossover in the middle of the barn, was those cows were going to get used to taking that shortcut per se. Well, then all of a sudden on foot bath, if I close that off and make them go down to the foot bath, are they just going to hang out up here and wait and not go down here and use the foot bath and go lay down? We also do have 2 brushes per pen. I actually just gave a tour today to my high school teachers, and like the brushes are the biggest hit. The cows are always using them. They love them. We're just now getting to the point 3 years in that we're starting to replace brushes. So the brushes last a long time. I think we love them as much as the cows do, because to be quite honest, if you're out working in the pen and you have an itch on your back, sometimes we just go up to the brushes and get a back scratch ourselves. So they've been very good for us. And I think the big thing is here in the winter time, especially late spring, our heifers will have such a thick coat of hair on them. That was why we originally put the brushes in our pre-fresh heifer pen, because I used to pay college kids to come up here and clip, heifers and everything. They'd come up here, make some good beer money, and they'd go on their way. But I'm like, this is costing me a lot of money. So we installed a brush, and it's unbelievable the amount of hair you will see under that brush every spring. We don't even clip anymore. Like, we still have the clippers, but I use it for my show calves now. I never use it, on our springing heifers anymore. Can you show the guided flow route? So I will show it. So where my cursor is, this will be the cow. So she'll come up here through the alley. This is the gate right here. So she's going to be milked. She's going to be sorted into this pen. Then she'll go in the robot. She'll come out of the robot. And then here's another sort gate. So this sort gate is the one that sorts to go to the separation pen here or straight out to the feed bunk. So if they come out straight to the feed bunk, they go all the way down the feed bunk here, and they go back through the finger gates here, and they're back over here where they can lay down in the stalls. If they don't get milked here at the sort gate, they'll go straight out to feed and then make this same loop again, is kind of how it works. And yes, we do have a sort pen or a catch pen area, which is right here. This was very highly debated whether we needed it or not, just because 3 years ago there wasn't a lot. No one at that time, whether we need it or not, we use it almost every single day. So today when the vet was here, You know, we have all the cows sorted that she needs to preg check right into here. We can lock them up, boom, boom, boom. She can go down the line. It's an efficient use of my time. It's an efficient use of her time. And I'm not paying her to go around and, you know, help me find cows out in the pen. So tomorrow, which is today for you guys, Tuesday, we'll sort our cows that are going to get foot trimmed into here. We actually take them over to another barn just across the driveway. So they're all sorted here right for us. The same with the dry cows. Obsing breeding, he can just come right in here and he can lock the cows up he needs to breed and just go right down the line. He's not wasting his time going out and looking for cows. So the catch pen, I think has paid for itself more and more again. I would probably put a couple more stalls in here if I was to do it again. 3 stalls probably isn't enough, but it is what it is. We have what we have to work with. How many cows do not adapt to robots and need to go back to the parlor? What are main culling reasons? So I don't know that number off the top of my head for sure. But I would say it's a very, very small percent. I would say it's less than 5%. It's just an occasional cow here or there that doesn't work out. We're blessed that we have a selected herd. So if she doesn't work in the robot because of udder conformation or whatever reason, she can go back to the parlor and still be milked. I'm not going to cull her out. But on our herd as a whole, probably the biggest factor that we call for is production. I don't remember what my herdsman's metrics all are, but it's around 80 pounds of milk or less. But then he's also got he has a report he built in Dairy Comp. So it tells us if their combined fat and protein is under a certain number and their milk is under a certain number. And if they're open or being a hard breeder or whatnot, we kind of have our own report that we've built, but low production is typically our biggest factor. We've sold a lot of good cows over the years when we were selling a lot for dairy sales that, you know, they were a good production cow milking 75, 80 pounds of milk, but I had several others that were better than her in my herd. And we've had several I know that we've sold over the years that have went on and been someone else's best producing cow. So it's just kind of how we tend to operate. We do calve all year round, and how we manage the mating is so we genomic test all of our cattle. So about, I think it's 55% of our herd today is getting bred to beef semen. The rest primarily to sex and a little bit of conventional semen. But that's kind of how we tend to manage the matings. We've built our own, because we work with Zoetis variously here in the States, and they've helped us identify what our herd ranges are for net merit. And they also have a wellness index. Those are the 2 things we look at the most. And then depending on where they are according to our index we've built for our herd, they fall into either getting sex semen, conventional, or beef semen. We've been breeding heavily on the beef semen now for the last 2 years. It's just here the beef calf is worth so much more than the Holstein bull calf by about probably $170 more today. So it's just in our best interest to do that and not grow, you know, all those replacements that we don't need. And do we have headlocks in our feeding area? Yes, we have headlocks in our whole feeding area. So even when we are giving OVSync shots or vaccinations, whatever, we'll throw the locks, catch who's ever in the locks, give them their shots in the locks, let them go, and go catch the others. You know, giving shots in this facility is 10 times different than our other facility. You're able to walk up to a cow and she can be laying down and you'll give her a shot and she won't get up. Our other facility, yeah, they know you're coming for something. And I think that's just the biggest difference between the 2 facilities today. Like, the cows are just so much calmer in the robot. barn than they are down in the freestall. But in the freestall, they're used to someone coming and getting them 3 times a day, the skid steer running all the time, and all of that stuff. We don't have sprinklers in our feeding area today, but I will tell you, this summer that we're just coming off of was our hottest, I think our 4th hottest summer on record back to the 1800s here. And I'm hoping for next year to have sprinklers put in on our feed line. I just think it would help a lot. In my conventional freestall barn, we do have sprinklers on the feed line.
Kristin, going back to the question about breeding. So you mentioned earlier that you raise your calves until 6 months and then they go to a grower and come back 2 months prior to calving.
Yep.
So you obviously have to do the breeding while they're with the grower. So do you, how does that work in terms of doing all the insemination, and do they work with Zoetis as well?
So what happens is at the grower, computer just came unplugged. Give me a second. At the grower, what we do is, so we worked with the co-op Select Sires. Select Sires comes in and they mate our cattle according to how our index from Zoetis has ranked the cattle on which sort of semen they should get. So that information, Select Sires also works very closely with our heifer grower. So all of the matings are provided to our heifer grower on how we wish them to be bred. We have our Select Sires rep drops off the semen down at the heifer grower for us, manages the inventory and everything for us. So then they pay a breeding service to come in and breed down there. That's a different bull stud actually, but they put our semen in. So all the semen gets put in how we ask for it. You know, we provide them with all the matings and everything. So every once in a while, we're all human, things happen, the right bull doesn't go on the right heifer, but it happens. I just hope it's, you know, Holstein on one that's supposed to get Holstein and beef that's on one that's supposed to get beef, and not beef and one that's supposed to get Holstein and then she gets pregnant. How do we train our heifers going through robots? So it is a lot of fetching. We do not have a training stall today because I still don't have a good spot to put one. So we do fetch 3 to 4 times a day based on the parameters we've built into our reports and everything. So typically when Noah gets here right away in the morning, he'll fetch anyone that's super overdue. We also do what we do. So every Wednesday afternoon, we move our new cows into the robot for the week. Then starting when my afternoon shift or my morning shift gets done milking Wednesday afternoon through Saturday morning, after every milking shift, the milkers go up. They are provided a list of the new heifers for the week. They go through and make sure that she's gotten milked. So we do that 3 times a day through Saturday morning. And then starting Saturday afternoon, we will go through on Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, and Sunday afternoon, just to make sure they're still coming through. And usually by Monday, they're good to go. What are your 3 design tips you would recommend to someone looking at AMS with robots? Must do's or must not do's? Oh boy. So I think my first thing would be is getting your ventilation correct, because if you don't have good ventilation in your barn, it's probably not going to work very well. The second thing for us, this barn was a huge step up for us in cow comfort from our old facilities. Our old facilities were built in the early 90s. Cows have gotten bigger. Today, my old facility fits my 2-year-olds very well, but my old cows, it doesn't fit so well. You know, I think getting your stall length, your stall bed, getting it right we still don't have some things right. We're constantly, I feel like, moving brisket boards, just trying to get our cows positioned in the right spots. The other thing, the biggest thing for us was really making sure we worked with the right contractor, the right builder. The builder we worked with, they have kind of became known across the state of Wisconsin as the premier robot barn builder. They did a phenomenal job. They still come back and inspect their work. You know, the things that I wouldn't do are not coming to mind right now for some reason, and I don't know why, because I'm sure there's something. And I'm sure my husband would have more of them than I do, just because he does more of the maintenance every day. You know, like, so we're 3 years into this barn. We have had 2 underground water lines already go. And they always go at the most inopportune time on a holiday or on a Sunday afternoon when you're trying to take a break from the farm. But I think a lot of it in the building phase is just making sure you are working with the right people and you have the right people on their team. One of our first contractors we brought in was going to do some of the ventilation work. They came to 2 meetings and we decided this isn't the right fit. We're going to find someone else. And I'm definitely glad that we decided to do that, because if everyone's not on their A game, it's probably not going to work, or someone's going to be frustrated about something because it's not going to get done right how you want it done. You got one chance to build it right. So make sure you get it right. And the best thing we did was probably spend 2 years on the road, just looking and learning and watching cows. If we wouldn't have done that, who knows? I would probably have a Lely system in today, to be quite honest, if I wouldn't have spent all the time on the road that I did. But definitely glad the decision we made. And our dealership has a peer group. We meet once a year with all of the dealership's robot customers. And when we showed up at the first meeting after we put the robots in and everyone was looking at us going, we want to know what you're doing. We thought, this is backwards. You're supposed to be telling us what to do because we're the new kids on the block. But it's just really working with the right people and getting your design right and what's going to work for your facility.
Kristin, this has been fantastic. I could listen to you talk for ages more. I think there's so many things we could learn from you.
Well, good.
Really valuable, lots of information that you've given to everyone, and lots of questions from everyone. Thank you so much for sending through all your questions, guys.